what we want to see is a sort of becoming a sort of operating system for the early stage venture ecosystem where we are collaborating with various syndicate based other funds and deploying as much capital as possible. And so one of the big new initiatives that is going to start is that we want to raise a suite of funds that will be there to co-invest with the community. And so this one that we're looking at will be a sort of match funding exercise where we will be following what the community is doing. And so, for example, if three Almas are investing together at least 50K into a company, the fund might be deploying 100K to complement that ticket, and that will build a very diversified portfolio. But the most important part is to be able to supercharge whatever the community is doing. So that's the big vision.
This is the One Point Podcast, and I'm Rohit Yadav. Today, we'll cover the story of Alma Angels, a prominent, diverse, and active community committed to backing women co founders, building tech ventures with global ambitions. And it was one of the first success stories in the ecosystem. So today, we will learn all about Alma Angels from its founding partner, Roxane Sanguinetti. Roxane is an experienced investor in public and private markets, as well as a venture builder. She's a trader by background, and she's recognized as ETF market making specialist and advises ETF asset managers on their expansion plans. And previously, Roxane was the head of strategy at a quant fund, GHCO, after leading their fixed income ETF trading. She also held positions at Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and fintech HUBX. She's a fierce advocate for diversity and inclusion, and she's the global co-head of Membership for Women in ETFs, which is a network of 12,000 plus professionals. So I'm absolutely delighted, Roxane, to have you on the podcast because you can cover not just this diversity topic, but you are so embedded in the financial and capital market ecosystem, and you have seen this from different directions. So you're not just an angel investor, you have been to hedge fund markets, capital markets, and so on. So I'm really excited to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining in.
Thanks for having me, Roy.
So the first question is, can you tell us a bit more about Alma Angels? What was the vision when you co-founded it, started it, and how have things gone till now?
Big question to start with. So Alma Angels has pretty much become the Europe's largest gender diverse investment community, and we have a pretty big mission that we've set for ourselves, which is to generate 1 trillion in women-led wealth by 2050. And the way that we think about it is that wealth at the early stage is created on the cap table, so either as a founder or as an investor. We brought together a community of angel investors, and we back tech or IP-rich startups, so essentially sciences, that have at least one woman on the founding team with double-digit ownership. And what brought us together was the idea that we've seen women being consistently underrepresented, underserved, or underestimated in the startup ecosystem, whereas in reality, they outperform. They receive a lot less funding than male founders, so they have to come up with incredibly creative solutions to make their businesses viable, and they tend to become profitable much faster. So they are kind of a gold mine for an angel investor. And when we talk about how little VC funding goes to women, we tend to remember that stat, but we tend to forget actually a really important one is that in research, we see that women-founded businesses produce 78% ROI as opposed to 31% for all male-founded team. And you know what? It's not malicious, the fact that men or white men tend to receive most of the funding. It actually comes from the fact that 90% of venture investors are white men, and it's human nature to connect better with people who look like us.
Okay.
So what we believe in at Alma is that the real key to systemic change in the ecosystem is to grow the pool of diverse tech writers. So it's not just about women specifically, but we believe that with more diverse investors in the ecosystem, we will see more diverse founders thrive. And there are millions of us professionals in the world who can make a difference via our investment.
Okay. We'll cover much more details about Alma. Can you mention some successes of Alma Angels? You started some time back, and as you described already, you guys are one of the biggest. So, in terms of deal size, community numbers, how many deals you have achieved, and much more. So, can you paint that picture for us?
Yeah, of course. So we started end of 2019, and we started from a meetup of 20, 30 of us, then went into a sort of WhatsApp community. Before WhatsApp communities were a thing, by the way, they didn't even exist on WhatsApp. Since then, in the last 5 years, we've trained over 550 women and men to become angel investors. And our community is diverse by nature, by the way. So about 70% of us are women, 30% men, and 40% people of color. And we have 6 international chapters now. And collectively, we have invested into more than 200 women co-founded ventures and at least 10 women-led venture funds. And we rely on the angels and the founders telling us when there is an investment. So we know there is at least this amount of deals that have been done. And to give you some context as well, is that a traditional syndicate or VC fund invests in about 5 to 15 companies in a year. We invest in about 50. And actually, last year was our most active yet. We had 68 deals done at Alma. And I guess in terms of successes as well, it's a bit of a side product of the community is that we see some investors start investing with the community. They build a portfolio, and then they either go on to join a venture fund or they start raising their own fund. And one of our big success story on that front is someone you might know, Rupa, who she started investing with Alma, and she built an impressive portfolio of 40 companies in about 3-4 years only.
Wow.
And she's now raised a 20 million fund that's called Araya Ventures. And one of the big reasons why this is important is that at the moment in the venture world, there's less than 10% of decision makers that are women, and so it's important for us to keep measuring the impact that we have on that front and overall. So we're kind of now getting involved in connecting the dots at different levels of the fundraising process. So between the entrepreneurs, the angels, venture funds, family offices, and LPs. So we're trying to do the work at various layers.
Okay. And it has been a long time since you are leading this initiative, right? It has, as you mentioned, becomes quite successful. So, what has your experience been running Alma Angels?
So yeah, I got involved. I was one of the very first angels, and I gradually got more and more and more active. And we are actually 4 co-founders originally. There's also David Sogol, who's been in venture for the last 25 years. There's Deepali Nanjia, who is a partner at Speeded Invest, and Ella Goldner, who is partner at Think VC. And for the past 5 years, or like 4 and a bit, we actually always did this on the side of our job. So this is a complete passion project, complete volunteer-led pro bono community. And then since last summer, me and David decided to come and do this full time because we saw that there's a real positive impact in the ecosystem with what we're building. And so we said, okay, let's try and take it to the next level. It's been a bit of a roller coaster, as you can imagine. And even more, I think, the last few months, there is a bit of a divide between what we are seeing in terms of activity at Alma and engagement and the need for what we're doing, and obviously that the backlash, right, that we're seeing mostly coming out of the US, but just generally speaking. But we're still seeing a lot of momentum in the last few months. So it's been exciting and frustrating at times, I will say.
Okay. And so let's just double down on this being full time and focusing your energies on building Alma Angels, right? So as you correctly mentioned, so there's a pullback sort of from different parts of the world and maybe different companies, so to say. But you rightly mentioned there hasn't been a pullback from the startup side. So startups are still building. There are still diverse founders who want to scale up and who are looking for check sizes. How do you connect these two? Are the community members within your community still excited about Alma Angels, and are they still going full throttle on how they can improve and take it to the next level?
I think so. I think so. We're seeing really big spokespeople in our community for what we're doing, both on the angel side and on the founder side, and in the venture world as well, and on both sides, both women and men. So there's still a clear need, and I think it's not because some of the governments are, rolling back their initiatives or some of the corporates are taking a step back. That doesn't mean that the individuals behind these companies or working in these companies are actually taking a step back. Like we're still, women are still 50% of the world. We represent a really big portion of the workforce. Like there's still going to be a lot of work done, but it's probably done a bit behind the scene. And actually, um, I recently heard the CEO of the London Stock Exchange, Dame Julia Hoggett, say something interesting around this topic. She said, I don't care how we get there, I care that we get there. So I don't care if it's, with certain metrics or certain government backed initiatives or privately backed or whatever it is. I care that actually the work is being done and that we keep progressing. That's the important bit.
Okay. And tell us about your experience on building the community, because this is one of the most important points within Alma Angels, the role of the community members coming together, financing, or let's say putting their capital into the startups, right? So how have you built this community, first of all? Second, how do you plan to take it forward this year, next year? And if there are some community stories, I know you already mentioned Rupa, who has gone to form her own fund, but there must be like other stories as well, right?
Yeah. So we've actually grown almost a bit in spite of us. It's always been done by word of mouth and
Okay.
referral that the Angels joined. But in the last 6 to 9 months, I would say, we've received more and more direct inquiries from people who hear about us in the ecosystem and want to come and support the mission. Actually, the way that we're built at Alma is different from a traditional syndicate. So people who join, they put their capital to work, but actually they also put a lot of their time in because in a traditional syndicate, you would have a syndicate lead that reviews all the deals that are coming through and then chooses to do due diligence on certain deals and then presents it to the community and says, this is a good deal. I think you should invest. We're doing things a little bit differently where we actually make all the deals available to all the angels in the community and anyone can refer a deal. And then the angels decide what they want to do due diligence on. So in the background, we help them to organize a call with the founder and to organize to gather the feedback and do the due diligence. But actually, they make the decision, which is, if you think about it, it removes the bias from the syndicate lead. So now instead of being, one or two people who are choosing which deals are the most interesting, you have technically 550 people that can say, I like this deal. And it's not necessarily one that I would have chosen, right? Because we all have different interests. So we are built a bit differently. And so you asked about how do we plan on building for the next few years. One big initiative that we've put together is that now we run workshops and programs for corporates where we go in and we train a cohort of 20 to 30 people, typically senior professionals or senior execs, and we take them on the journey of angel investing. And it's a mix of giving them, all the theory that they need, but actually taking them on for practical due diligence and getting them to invest. So for me, a big win is if I can see a new angel put in a ticket within 3 months of having onboarded.
Wow.
That's the win. That's the goal. I think so. In terms of other success stories, if I go on the founder side rather than take it to the investor side as well, is most of the feedback that we receive from founders has been very positive. They thank us for creating a safe space where they can find investors and for kind of bringing this positive change around since we
Okay.
started. So one of the example I can give you is that on just this Tuesday at one of our events, I caught up with a founder. He's been in the Alma portfolio since 2021, and he recently pitched for a small bridge round. And following that pitch, over 20 Almas started due diligence, and 5 have already committed, and a few more are coming soon. And since that has happened, she's been able to use that in the narrative for pitching to other syndicates, to other people. And so she's seen a lot more momentum in her race.
Okay.
And so another one to give you that same event, there's one founder who raised some funding from Alma last year, and she's now looking to do another quick round because they've now, with that last round, managed to almost get to 2 million ARR. And so they want to consolidate. They feel they can go out to the VCs. And what she said was that the Almas that she got on her cap table were not necessarily her biggest ticket, but they were actually her most value add.
Okay.
I mean, obviously it's music to my ears. That's what we want.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, it's not all pink and glossy. So if you want some of the
Tell us more
negative
about the
feedback,
challenges as well.
yeah. So I think for some founders, they might struggle to understand that we are different from a syndicate. So it's not necessarily that you pitch to one person in Alma and then we don't do that work of gathering 100 tickets all together. So sometimes they might feel like chasing tickets a bit like herding cats, right? And so it's on their side that they need to do the work to gather the documentation from the angels who committed, for example. So that is something that we're doing work on to make them understand that when they pitch to Alma, it's the same as if they pitched, 20 or however so many individual angels, and then we give them all they need to then do the follow-ups and the chasing and all this, and we help them in the background, but we don't necessarily do SPVs, not always. And there has been only one instance of bad behavior from an angel that has been reported to us recently, which was an angel who started chasing a founder to get out of a very small 2K or 5K investment after only investing for 5 years. And that angel had just not understood what it means to be an angel, that, you're holding for the very long term, that there is no liquidity event, right? And for that founder being chased for something like that was just an added frustration. We took over the conversation, and what we realized that angel joined Alma, did that investment in 2021, and then completely dropped off. And so they definitely missed out on all the content that we put out and all the training that we put out around, what it means to be an angel and the good behaviors that we should see. But wherever we can, we try our best to step in and to be that additional support if the founder needs.
Okay. So in terms of strength, the biggest strength for Alma is the community part of it, which means that it's not just the check size, but you're getting vocal supporters, right, for the startups. And in terms of challenges, you mentioned obviously education of angel is one of the biggest topic. I don't think so it's specifically related to Alma, but it's in general for the entire ecosystem. Retail investors, high net worth individuals, they are not up to date, and neither they're up to mark with respect to the knowledge of how and what investments need to be made and how they get successful, and it's a long-term asset class and so on. So there's a lot of education needed. So I wouldn't put that on your side for sure. There's still an aspect that you mentioned that I would like to double click on, which is the investor side of it. So if you look at diversity as a broader topic, you talked about we need to build more people who can invest, more diverse investors. So if you talk about, let's say, improving the situation for diverse founders, do you think having diverse tickets is the biggest way that we can change the ecosystem? Or do you think there are some other ways as well which can be implemented, maybe not by Alma, but maybe by somebody else, which can be effective? So do you have some ideas on that direction?
I think, yeah, it is a collaborative effort, right? And that's a very big question, actually, because we're all trying to figure out what is the most impactful way to make a systemic change. From our perspective, yes, it makes a big difference when you have someone who understands you from the very beginning that you talk to them. The truth is that I was explaining at the beginning, it's human nature to connect when we look alike, and it's even more important for very early stage founders because at the very beginning, you invest in an idea when you're an angel, right? Like you come in and there's barely anything that's been built, right? There's just a very big vision and there is a founder or a founding team that has a certain set of skills, but that also has a lot of passion for making things happen with that vision. And so you need someone on the other side of the table who will have a positive reaction to that and who will say, yes, I believe in you, but I believe in you because as a person, right, I back you. And that's the most important piece. And the problem that we've seen times and times again is that a lot of women or a lot of diverse founders will be kind of addressing problems that are for their demographic. And then they're facing white male investors who don't necessarily understand that problem, doesn't understand the size of the problem, which I think it's a bit lazy, if you ask me, actually, because, I wonder how many investors go into, quantum computing and bet that they can understand it from the start. So when they say, I don't understand, period care products, like I'm sure you could figure it out if you want to. But you see what I mean? It's like there's a certain of there's a safe space that opens up when you're talking to someone who is from the same background as you, and it's not necessarily gender, but it might be the same origin
Okay.
story, the same university, the same whatever it is. Yeah, so diverse founders tend to address problems that are typical of a specific demographic. Not always, right? But what we see is that when you're facing an investor who gets you, who is from not necessarily the same gender, but it might be the same background, the same nationality, the same university, you get each other a lot faster, you connect a lot faster, and it is easier for that founder to get tickets, essentially. And then that investment is not necessarily what is going to completely change everything, but that might create a certain momentum that will then open up more doors. And that's what an angel does in theory, is that you're here, you believe in someone, you back them, and then you open more doors for them, either to more investors, to customers, to whatever it is. You become a sort of sounding board. And so that initial connection is crucial. But then you asked around, are there other initiatives that should happen? And the answer is yes, right? It can't be just an isolated initiative. We need to see governments getting in there. We need to see private companies getting in there with different angles. So one of the big initiatives in the UK at the moment is called the Invest in Women Task Force. And
Okay.
it's essentially a group that's been trying to pull together institutional capital to create a fund of funds for women entrepreneurs or women-led funds. And we have, as part of this task force, different committees that are looking at solving or addressing specific problems in the ecosystem. So on the subcommittee that's for angels and wealth managers, so trying to figure out how do we bring more high net worth women into the conversation of venture investing.
Okay.
There is a collective effort that needs to happen, and it can't just be on the private investor or private individual to be solving this.
Okay. If it's transparent and open, can you tell us more about this initiative that you mentioned right now, and how far along are you in this initiative in your subcommittee, for example?
I'm sure. So the initiative has now raised about, I think it's 255 million from different institutions. So there's, for example, there's Barclays, there's the Visa Foundation, there's MNG, there's a few others that have pulled commitments, and they are now in the process of choosing the fund manager who will manage that pool of capital. So we will have more updates coming out of this, normally by the end of this month, actually.
Wow.
On who is the fund manager and what is the exact strategy of the fund. What has been clear is that there is a desire for institutions to get involved. So that's been really positive to see. Now we need to see how it will be executed. On our community specifically, we've recently held a roundtable with wealth managers, different types of wealth managers and multifamily offices, and trying to understand what are the biggest hurdles. And that's given us a lot of food for thought, where we're now looking at creating a sort of central repository of resources that would be a source of truth for the wealth managers to direct people when they want to start angel investing.
Okay.
Because one of the issues is that as a wealth manager, you have certain regulation in place and fiduciary duty that stops them from making individual recommendations on deals. However, they get asked from their clients, how do I start? Or I want to do these deals. I want to look at these funds, these venture funds. And so they need a sort of like a safe resource that they can share with them. So that's what we're looking at the moment.
Awesome. So on the investor side, what I'm hearing more and more is it's a lot about education, educating the investors to
Yeah.
understand what this ecosystem is all about, what investing in the ecosystem means in general, not just diverse founders, but in general, what investing in angel tickets means and so on. I want to flip on the founder side now, and I want to understand. I mean, raising capital is challenging for everybody. I'm saying as a blanket statement because last couple of years has been tough for a lot of folks, whether they are diverse or not diverse, because of the whole ecosystem, the way it has moved, and so on. So capital is always constrained, and founders have always been sort of complaining about not getting the capital. How do you reconcile, let's say, founders' challenges? Do you think apart from the fundraising, there are more challenges which specifically the diverse founders face within the ecosystem? It could be anything, education or something else that you have seen, which
Yeah.
probably a lot of folks hearing the podcast might not know about.
I think one of the biggest challenge is I would say the lack of access when they start and when they go out to raise. So they end up the time to raise for a diverse founder, and I'm not talking just women, but diverse founders in general, is a lot longer than for all white male teams. There are reasons behind this, but one very basic issue with this is that if an investor doesn't know that this is kind of the norm, then they might look at a deal and say, "Ooh, they've been in the market raising for the last 6 months. There must be something wrong with this raise," which is not necessarily true. It might be that, they haven't been able to reach the right investors. They have been facing a lot of biases in the fundraising process, or that it was a terrible time to raise as well. But like, there's a lot of external factors that come into play. That I think we need to move away from that narrative of if there is no FOMO, or if it hasn't closed in 2 weeks, then it's a bad deal. That's not true. It might also be that the founders needed, or if it's a solo founder, they needed to focus on executing in the business to be able to raise better or at better terms. So, as a founder, I think that's probably the most challenging thing, is continuing building on your product and building on your business while going out to fundraise. The two are extremely time consuming, and the two are pretty much full time jobs. And so it is, I think, probably the most difficult part
Okay.
for founders, like the most challenging obstacle.
Okay. And how do you propose to solve for it? Is there low hanging fruit that you would recommend?
Yeah, I think one thing that founders don't do well enough, or don't do early enough, is actually preparing the fundraise in a structured way. So it's actually, before you go out and start to fundraise, before you need to go out and fundraise, you should sit down and actually prepare what that fundraise is going to look like. So have your list of your top targets, have your list of,
Uh-huh.
then your bottom ones, and kind of prioritize based on that. And your fundraising process doesn't actually start from the moment that you say, "I'm fundraising." It should be that even while you're during the year, you're building and you're working on your product, if you can stay close to people that you've met over time that could potentially be investors in the business, that's kind of crucial to be building that momentum. And so if you've had these conversations quite early on and they've been staggered, it's not it's not a surprise for the investors when you come out and say, "I'm now ready," and then actually you can then much more reduce your time frame in the market.
Got it. Couple of last questions. I know the time is running out. So you mentioned already the future, the big future vision for Alma Angels, right? And you also mentioned you are at in 5 locations right now, or 6. Correct me if I'm wrong. So if you want to reiterate, reconnect all those things together and paint us a picture of where do you want to go for the next 1 year. So what are the kind of top KPIs that you're looking for? Because
Yeah.
now you're full time into Alma Angels, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we spent the last 2 months thinking really like long and hard about all this, and we have some really big plans. Our big vision is to see globally 10,000 angels investing into at least 1,000 companies every year. And for this to happen, it has to be a global community, a global platform. And then what we want to add, our north, or like our key metric is around capital deployed. We do things around 3 pillars. So we have capital, education, and support. But our number one priority is around capital because we think that founders get tons of resources, mentorship programs, etc., and what they really need is cash. So it's a conscious decision that we want to focus on the angel side. And so all our metrics focus on new angels trained, and I mentioned earlier, but if they manage to invest within 3 months of onboarding, that's the big win. We focus on the number of active almas. So every year, the almas take a pledge that they are willing and able to invest in at least 1 to 3 companies in the next 12 months. So we keep track of that. And then finally, we look at the number of due diligence calls and the number of deals that we do. At the moment, we have a target of about 50 deals a year, and last year we did 68. But if we look at this year, we've had 30 new angels that have come on board since the start of the year. 8 of them have already invested. We've already done 27 due diligence calls, and we've invested in 18 companies already. So there's already like really good momentum. But what we want to see is a sort of becoming a sort of operating system for the early stage venture ecosystem where we are collaborating with various syndicate based other funds and deploying as much capital as possible. And so one of the big new initiatives that is going to start is that we want to raise a suite of funds that will be there to co-invest with the community. And so the
Okay.
first one that we're looking at will be a sort of match funding exercise where we will be following what the community is doing. And so, for example, if 3 almas are investing together at least 50K into a company, the fund might be deploying 100K to complement that ticket, and that will build a very diversified portfolio. But the most important part is to be able to supercharge whatever the community is doing. So that's the big vision. And I mentioned it at the beginning, but we want to be able to see that within the next 25 years, we can generate 1 trillion in women-led wealth. That number, by the way, isn't just pulled out of a hat. There is calculations behind it. And if you look at the UK alone, if women were scaling companies as fast as men, it would add 250 billion to the economy. So if you take this on a global scale, then 1 trillion is totally achievable.
That's an amazing thought. And with that, I would like to say thank you so much, Roxane, for joining us and shedding light on all things that you're doing for the ecosystem. I know it's not easy, especially in this time. And what you guys are doing by investing and keeping the momentum on and tackling the biggest issue of capital going into startups, into diverse founders. It's amazing. So hats off, kudos to that. And fingers crossed for the fund idea that you're trying to build. I know it will be amazing. So all the best for that. Roxane, thank you so much for joining in.
Thank you so much, Roy. It was really fun. Thank you.